Good morning. Ayin Beis, volume 2, volume 3, page, on top of page 1391. 1391. So, to sum up what we've learned and what we're learning, we're talking about the difference between the stages, the process from how Ayin becomes Yesh, from a higher reality, we'll call it, a higher divine reality, a sublime, ethereal reality, will become a defined existential reality. What I'm defining as Ayin to Yesh, that it's a process that doesn't happen in one jump. It goes through steps, generally 3 steps: Bria, Yitzira, Asiya, or like he called it earlier, Chemer, Tzura, Tikkun. First, it's unshaped and undefined, what he called the world of Tohu, at the level of Tohu. Then there begins to get some type of definition and form, Vayu, and then Asiya, or Tikkun, the 3rd level, is not just a Tzura, it's all the details of a finished product, finished entity. The context is because he's been explaining how Bria, even though it's higher than Yitzira, even though the shapeless entity before it has form is higher than form, but form has the quality of Gili. It's revealed, manifests, it's integrated, internalized. And he compared it to Igulim v'Yeshet, where Igulim is like the level of Bria, or Makif. It hovers, it surrounds, it's more of a transcendent energy, less defined but higher level, but it's called Nefesh. Because what happens with Yesher is that the Yesher means literally a line, but Yesher means the energy that permeates, that penetrates, that enters within. And that is actually the revealed structure, the integrated structure. That's the level of Ruach. And again, to sum up the different things that he called, Igulim v'Yesher, Bria, Yetzira, Nefesh, Ruach, Tagin, and Osius. Tagin are the crowns that hover above, they're above the letters themselves. And the Osius, the letters, that is like Bria, that is Nefesh, and then come the letters themselves, is Yesher, is Yitzira. And in addition to that, after that, he went on to speak about what we learned yesterday, was that this is Tohu and Vayu, as I just mentioned. And he brought the Gemara in Chigiga that speaks about what is the Tohu and Vayu from the verse in Yeshaya. Kav Tohu v'avnei Vayu, that Kav Yoruk, the green line that surrounds everything. So it's like a green, you can say green, even though the word is kav, it's a line, you can see like a green, when you say like a ribbon almost. That's Makif is kol ha'elam kulei. From there originates darkness, chayshach. So it makes sense that it's Bria. And Vayu these are the damp stones of the rock, of the bedrock, from where water comes. And that is Vayu. That already begins to have some shape. Surah Sabinin. Yeah. Then he brought from Tikkun Zeyar. I'm reading at the bottom of page 1390. Tikkun Zeyar, a Yaruk, which is green, is from the sun. Mesitra de Ima, the supernal Binah, mother, which is Ima, mother. The Tshuva Kav Yaruk, Escha L'Kol Alma. Again, the line, the green line that surrounds and encompasses the entire world, because it's above, as we explained yesterday, and he says that because Elam, the world, is the level of Zah. And Binah is above Zah, Makif is Seviv L'Zah. So that's the level of the green line, which is also called Melech Elam. Binah is called Melech Elam. Yeah. Let me just elaborate, but I said I would look up a bit more about the green line, why it's green. So I actually found interesting things about that. Firstly, what I said yesterday is correct. It says in a number of places that there's the different colors that correspond to different spheres. And in this case, we're dealing with Binah relates to Yoruk. So one of the interesting things I found was, I think in the Pardes from the Ramak, that he says that in vegetation, anything that is still fresh is always green. And then when it ripens, it changes color. In other words, since in original form, many things are green. Actually, in the Gemara, they talk about two levels of green, whether it's green like a leek, or green like the green hue in gold has a certain greenish tint in it, which is far lighter green. But here we're talking about a darker green, and so therefore it fits very well with the idea of chaymer, because when it's still unshaped, meaning it's not yet fully developed, you'll see many fruits and vegetables are green until they become whatever their color is as they develop further. So green seems to be the color that is connected to the early stages of development. That's one thing I found. Okay, so now to take this next level, then the next thing we learned was, it says in Eitz Chaim. In Eitz Chaim, he says like this. That there's the level of Ein Sof, which is Efes, complete null and void, because it has no way to grasp it. There's no definition at all. Then comes Tohu, which is the level of Keser, and based on that, we now have two levels. Efes is the higher level of Keser, Atik, which is called Tachtena Shebamaitzel, the lower of the emanator, meaning it's representing the divine, and Arechampin, the lower level of Keser, that is the root of the Netzalim, of the emanations. That's Tohu. That's called Ayin. And that's the last thing we learned. And I elaborated yesterday about these two levels in the context of interface, and we're going to learn more about it right now. So we're on top of page 1391, second line, and I'm going to continue reading inside. The pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. So he says like this: V'zehu shabina nikra tohu. Remember, we said before that Binah is, in Tikkun Ezer, he said, is the Kav Yoruk, the green line that is all encompassing, is the level of Binah. V'zehu shabina nikra tohu ki miteferes the ima. Because from Teferes of Binah, Ima is another name for Binah, the mother. Nasa Kesel Lazah. That becomes the crown of Zah. Like we learned earlier, that Binah is, as he said before, that the Olam is Zah, and Binah is the Makif and Sevev Lazah. So that now is consistent with Tohu, because Tohu is like Keser. Tohu is the Keser Arechampin of the emanations. So more specifically, it's Binah that becomes the Keser, the crown of Zah, the Midos of the emotions. Like it says in the beard, it's most likely the Kutta Teira of the Alter Rebbe, in the explanation on the Maimer Al Kol Kovid, which is in Shir Hashirim, he explains it there. So therefore, it's consistent with what we've been learning here. So now Binah is compared more like to the Igulim of Makif, to Nefesh, what he called earlier Nefesh, Bria, and Zah is Mekanana B'Yitzira, is nested in Yitzira. That's the actual structure. Ulechein Nikra Binah. One minute. L'chein nikra habina hu b'chinas helam. Not sure what he's saying. That's why it's called habina, which is a state of concealment, because the Zah, the Midas, is when it gives birth. In other words, in the mind, you don't have yet the birthing of the emotions. I think that's what he means, unless he's referring to Habina with a hey. And let's just assume Bina is Helen. L'chein nikra Bina Helen because it's a keser. V'alkein nikra gam kein Tohu. That's also why it's called. That's why it's also called Tohu, because like we said before, that Tohu is matas Adam. It's baffling. It's mysterious because it's unshaped yet, and we don't yet have a name for it. It's not been defined. So that's what he's defining as Bina right now. Okay. Give me a moment. Let me just see. Okay. So let's continue now. Okay. So Bina, so there's an expression that says Mida Kaimel Shaila means that Bina is the level of me, as we're going to learn a little later in more detail. The Kaimel Shaila, which means it remains questionable. That's what the Kaimel Shaila means. The Loy Da. I have to look up the source for this expression. Is anybody familiar with this expression? One minute. Give me a moment. Yeah. So it's from the Zohar. One minute, please. Okay. Yeah. So Bina means me the Kaimel Shaila, that it's the level of me, which means it still remains elusive. The Loy Da, not to be known. So it remains beyond our full comprehension. Even though Bina is comprehension, but compared to the level of revelation of Midos, which is already an expression in the context of relationships, Bina remains something above that. Like he says, the Kaimel Shaila Mipnei Shi B'Bchinas Yedias HaMetzias. So it's not completely beyond us. Like we said before, it's a level of ayin, but it's not completely beyond us because there is Yedias HaMetzias. Bina does give us an awareness of something that exists, al koponim. V'loy k'bay b'chinas Efes. Efes, what we learned earlier about the higher level of Keser, that's even higher than Tohu. That's Efes. She'enu yedua gam mitziyuseh. That's so beyond us that we don't even know of its existence. With Bina, you say Kaimel Shaila means there's something there, but we don't fully understand it. That's because you know the Metzius you know about. Like if you may recall earlier, we learned about Bria is like the Aspaklari Sheina Meira. When you look at something through a translucent glass, so you know it exists. That's why you can appreciate higher levels. But you don't see it clearly like through a transparent glass. So really there are three levels here. One is completely hidden beyond us altogether. That's Efes, the higher level of Keser, what he called Efes. Then Tohu or Bria, or the level of Binah, which originates like the lower level of Keser. That is beyond us, but it's not completely beyond. You know of its existence. And then Zah, Olam, is when we actually experience it in full glory in a way that we can relate to it in a personal way. It's not beyond us. So that would be the next level. So that's what it says. So it's not Efes, and that's when maybe kind of the shadow of a. So it's not fully known, but you know it exists. Now, why is this so relevant? Because if you recall, when we talked about the interface of Keser and so on, you want to have something that is both divine and also we can relate to it. So based on this, Yitzira is the world that we can relate to. Bria is still somewhat amorphous, like Tohu, and we can't really relate to it, but it's not completely beyond us. And then there's a level that's completely beyond. So that's what we have here now, these three levels. It's talking about two primarily, but that's the three levels. I'll explain this more as we read on. Let me just continue reading. Ukiyadua, Besider, Bepirush Baruch Sha'amar. I'm sorry, I said Kamosha Koser Besider. Like he writes in the Siddur. This is the Siddur of the Mittler Rebbe. It's called Siddur Imdach, where the Mittler Rebbe published and gathered together all the discourses of the Alter Rebbe in the order of the prayer book of the Siddur, and he published it. So in the Siddur, in explaining the prayer Baruch Sha'amar that we say every morning, he says the B'chinas Radloh le'nei de Mitziyusei Klal. Radloh Reisha de lo Yisyada, which is referring to the highest level of Atik. It means the head that is unknown. You don't even know of its existence. It's so beyond us, we don't even know it exists, let alone we don't know its personality. V'nikra Seichel Mufla, it's called a wonder. Seichel Mufla means an awesome or a wondrous or a Seichel Mufla, a Seichel that's beyond. Hainu Shemufla Yediyose Legamri. It's the awareness, its perception, its awareness of it is completely mufla, completely beyond us. Also from the level of Chachmila of Atzilus. So you're talking about Arech Ampin, which is the beginning, Chachmis Stima, the concealed wisdom, the superconscious that relates to the revealed wisdom. There at least you know it exists. You know, for example, that ideas come from somewhere. But then there's a level that's completely beyond it. You don't even know of its existence. So that's the level of Efes. Then comes the level of Tohu or Bria or Binah, which becomes later Bria, which is, we have some awareness of it, but only its existence, not its personality. But the level of Arech Ampin, the lower level of Keser, Nei de Mitziyus al Kapon. Its existence is known. The fact that we have a conscious idea that we conceive of, we may not be able to see where it comes from, those ideas, but you know it's coming from somewhere. So you can extrapolate to some extent what's the source, just like we can extrapolate that beneath the earth there are well springs because we see water coming, breaking through and becoming rivers or other ways that the water rises through the earth. So you know it's there, even though we may not see it, it's beneath the surface. So the same thing here. There's some connection, some awareness. And this level of Arech Ampin, which is also called the Chachma of Arech Ampin, is called the hidden wisdom or the superconscious wisdom. Nikra Seichel Nelam, not Seichel Mufla. Seichel Mufla means completely beyond, completely unreachable, inaccessible. Seichel Nela means a hidden seichel. When you say something is concealed, you're not saying it's completely removed. Concealed means it's not revealed, but concealed it is, beneath the surface, beneath the revelation, beneath what is revealed lies the concealed state. Yesh shaychus, it has some, at least some connection, something in common with that which is revealed. Like we said before about Bria, when you take a raw piece of clay and you shape it into some form, so yes, the raw piece of clay is a concealed state, but it's still clay. And when you shape it, there is something in common, that they're both made of the same matter. However, one is in a concealed state and one is in a revealed state. Okay. So it has some connection to Gili. V'gam b'chinas helam hu sheyedim al kaponim sheyesh dover hanelam. And additionally, besides it having a relationship, this level that's called concealed, we know at least that there's something that's concealed. So you know there's something concealed that you can't see, but you know of its existence. The ima yesha eni yedei mahu, and even though we don't know its personality, because we can't see it because it's concealed, harihu yedei zeish shebehechrich ima yesha eni yedei mahu harihu yedei zeish shebehechrich lemishesh davar kazesh u'bechinas helam. Nevertheless, he's aware of the existence of it because you have to say there's something that's in a state of concealment that's affecting that reveal. The revealed is coming from a concealed state. So, for example, when we say the koyach nelam of, here we're talking about seichel, that we know a revealed conscious idea, has to have a state where it was not conscious, where it was not revealed. Or if you see somebody use their hand to write words, there's a koyach nelam behind the scenes that the person has the capacity in a concealed way to be able to write. Then when you actually write, it comes from the concealed into the revealed. But there's always something behind the scenes, so to speak. But so you know of its existence, you just don't know its personality because you can't see it. Ukamoy kain, same thing. So since you have to say there's something, so you have some you have some awareness, some perception of it, and that's what means that its existence is known. Not its mohus, but its existence is known. And so too is it with Binah. Its existence is known, its personality is not known. We're talking about known from our perspective, not from above, from the perspective of the recipient. So to just use a very practical example, when you have a teacher teaching you an idea, and you understand the idea, you can rest assured that the teacher has concealed behind what he's revealing much more than what you see, and you know it. You know that it exists. You just don't know what he knows more, but you know that there's more to what he's saying. What he's expressing in his words is the Gilui part, but there's a whole Helen part. And then there's a dimension that he spoke before, Seichel Mufel, that's completely not even known. You don't even know that you don't know because you don't even have any inkling what it's like because it's a completely removed level. Are there any questions before I continue on? Okay. So let me just elaborate a bit before I read on. Remember, in the process of growth and development and maturity, we begin our lives with an awareness that is quite limited, an existential awareness that's limited. How do we perceive things? First, we perceive them simply through our senses. What we see, what we hear, what we taste, touch, and smell. Obviously, as a child develops and grows a little older, we realize there are things that you can't see, hear, taste, touch, and smell, but you can deduce, you can extrapolate that it's there. That's what intelligence, it tells you that there must be a force. Like just like when humans discovered gravity. So no one sees gravity, but when you see that objects fall to the earth from above, you know there must be something. And then the theory was developed, the theory of gravity. The same thing with other scientific theories. electromagnetism, the nuclear forces, atomic energy. So no one's ever seen an atom or subatomic particles. But we've come to understand that matter as that we do see is made up of molecules, which in turn is made up of atoms, in turn made up of subatomic particles. But there are many things, even in the scientific level, that we haven't even begun to discover. There was a time we did not know about the quantum reality or quantum mechanics. It wasn't even assumed. And then it was discovered. So how many more things are there that we have not discovered? But that you could still say is a level of Helam, except there's a Helam that we know exists because it's been proven one way or another. And then there's a Helam that we don't know it exists, but we will ultimately discover deeper levels. But then there's a Helam that's completely beyond and will always remain unknown. Now, why is this so important? Because beyond the scientific approach, there's the process of us trying to relate to and understand godliness, understand God. Now, we understand existence is the creation. So just like when you look at a piece of art and you study the art, you can figure out from the art to some extent what the artist is like, what feelings and sentiments and experiences he had when he created this art or she created this art. Just like anything in life, you study it, and from the effect, you come to discover what is the cause. That's called the intelligent process of deconstructing or tracing the sources and roots and origins of things. In the context of Ayin Beis, Chassidus, our goal is to come from our limited perception of things to understand what are the underlying forces at work that make us tick in existence. And we know it's not just one level. It's many, many levels. It's a journey that Chassidus calls and Kabbalah calls from Asiya to Yetzirah to Bria to Atzilus to Keser, all the way to the highest levels. So essentially what he's really saying here, he's spelling out some of these levels, he's talking about that process. The Rebbe Rashab, however, is being very dense and very concise here, so that's why I'm elaborating. But remember, in the context of Ayin Beis, all of that we're learning now is coming to help us appreciate these higher states of consciousness, or superconsciousness for that matter. So in this context, you can say Yetzirah. I'm not talking about Asiya. Asiya is definitely the lowest level, the most revealed, the final product. But even Yetzirah, which associates with Midos, is already a defined structure. However, it's not all completely defined because it still needs Asiya Tikkun, but relative to Bria, it's something that's revealed. Behind the scenes of the Midos is a Binah, is the mind that gave birth to the Midos. So when you see someone who developed a love, we're talking about developed love, we're not talking about natural love now. A love that was developed through his bananus, through contemplation. You came to contemplate on another person, or in this case, on God. And that contemplation brought you to have a feeling of being attracted to, being drawn to, and loving God. So the mind is giving birth to the Midas, but the mind itself recedes into the background. When you see love, you don't see the Binah. You know it's there because that's what brought you to these feelings. So Binah remains what he's calling here, that level that he calls Ayin. You don't know its personality, but you know it exists. The root of Binah in this case would be the lower level of Keser, Tohu, where it's Ayin. So it's concealed, but it's not completely beyond us. Then there's a level of Efes, what he called Ein Sof. That's completely beyond Seichel Mufla. And that's the next stage of development where you come to realize something that is so purely divine, completely beyond us. That's also important in the development, but you can't begin and jump there when you're going from the bottom up. You have to first, what do I understand? What do I come to extrapolate that I don't fully understand, but I know it's there? And then what do I realize that there are things I don't even know it's there, but I believe, faith, or you ultimately have some sense that there's something completely beyond us. So all this is really in Avodah stages of our levels of reaching higher states of consciousness and higher states of awareness. That's a little explanation to what is being discussed here. Okay. Any questions? So now comes the next piece. Next piece, we're going to go again slowly because everything here is very dense and concentrated. So he says, Ukamesha Kosov, Hapardis, that the Pardes writes, like the Pardes writes, the Ramak, Ramosha Koraviro, in his Magnum Opus, the Pardes, which was quoted quite a number of times in previous pages. The Yedias Chachmose or Binose is Baruch, that the perception or the awareness of God's Chachma and Binah, his wisdom and his understanding, who kamo Yedias Atzmuse is Baruch. That's like knowing the core essence of God. Now, I'm not sure exactly what this means, to be very perfectly honest. I think what he's trying to say is that Binah gives us some inkling about higher states of the divine. Because Hu v'chachmase echad, God is one with his wisdom and with his Binah. So there's an element that is beyond us and giving us some understanding in what Atzmusei Baruch is, which makes it more elusive. I think that's why he's bringing this point. That's what it sounds like to me. I'm not positive, because he's following what he just said. Abinu Shnei Mitzusa Muhuse Eni Yudua. Now, Atzmusei Baruch doesn't mean Atzmus here, because that is beyond Binah. That's even beyond Efes. So he can't be referring to that. So he's telling us that Binah gives us some type of Neidim Mitziyuseh, something in Yedias Atzmusei Baruch. Maybe the parentheses will help clarify it. So I'm telling you right now, I'm not positive what this line means. I need to look into it a little more, but let's read the parentheses and maybe we'll get some clarity. So the Rebbe Rashab now says, U'b'sefer shel Beinim, Chilik Beis Perik Ches. In the second section, which is Shara Yichud Va'amuna, chapter 8, Kosav, he writes, Shekamoi Keinu Gam B'midosav Yizbarach. That this is also true with God's attributes, with God's so-called emotional attributes, like Chesed and Gvura. When God does Chesed, Chesed is also an extension of Atzmusei Baruch, like he says there, Commission Kosav Sham, El Atzmusei Muhusei Ritzeinei, Umidas Chazdei Hakol Achdus Pshuta Mamish, Shehi Atzmusei Muhusei. That Midas Chazdei, which is a Midah, God's love, God's kindness, is one, all one unified whole, which is all Atzmusei Muhusei. Meaning it's not separate from God. It's an extension of Atzmusei Muhusei. So based on that, you could say, why are you saying here that only Binah is that way? The Midas too, the Midas of Atzilus also has that aspect. That's what it looks like he's addressing. But let's continue reading, and I'll see what we can make sense of what he's saying here. Pardes nida, that's what it says in Shari Yuchid Vamuna. The Pardes nida, it appears shemechalik b'zeh, that the Pardes disagrees with this. Or not say shemachalik, that he distinguishes between Chachma and Binah and the Midas, that they're not the same. Uke'es, the Rebbe Rashab writes, Loi matzosi inyan zeh bepardes, and presently, I've not found this idea in the Pardes, v'huva le'il, and was also cited above, it was also brought above, cited above, v'atzorech la'ayin. The Rebbe Rashab is writing that this needs iyun, this needs some more delving into an analysis. So it's interesting, he's saying that the part that seemingly distinguishes mechalik bezeh, whereas in Tanya, in Chayuhi Garmuhi, it sounds like it's all part of oneness. One Agdus Pshuta and the Pardas separate, but he says, I've not found it in the Pardas. So, of course, the obvious question is, how then does the Rebbe Rashab know that it's different, that the Pardas has a different approach? So, we need to analyze this a bit more. I'm not fully understanding it myself. But let me continue reading till the end of the parentheses. For Efsher, and perhaps, why is there a distinction? Because the Mochin is the level of Eir, of energy. When we say that you are one with Chayuhi, which can mean energy, is primarily referring to the Mochin. Mashenkin Midas and Midas Garmuhi. Midas compared to Mochin are more Garmuhi. It literally means bones. Means atzomes. Garmuhi is like the Kalim. Because Midas compared to Mochin is far more the energy behind something. Midas is already its expression in a relationship, whether it's chesed, kindness, or discipline, so on. So that would be a distinction between Mochin, Chachma, Binah, and Midas. Now one is higher than Ir v'Garmuhi. Ube'etz Chaim Kosav. Okay, let me stop a second. So that would make the distinction between the Mochin and the Midas, and therefore what he said before the parentheses applies well, because Midas is more revealed, like Zah, Yitzira. Mochin, or in this case Binah, is more concealed, even though it's not completely concealed, because it's more expressive of the divine, and I'll explain this in a moment with an example. But then he says, Ube'etz Chaim Kosav, Shigam Binah Nikr Garmuhi. So the plot thickens. Now he says Binah is also called Garmuhi, not just the Midas, L'gabe HaChachma, compared to Chachma. Nevertheless, B'kol Mokem Ikar Garmuhi Hu B'Midas. The primary level of Garmuhi is the emotions. And the primary unity and union is with the Mochin, Chachma, and Binah in comparison to Midas. So let me explain this, if I may. Going back to what we discussed earlier. So there are two ways that we can experience godliness. I'm going to speak very balabatish, very practical right now. One is when you see blessings in your life. Like we say, B'tuvei b'chazdei. Zonas kol elam b'chazdei b'tuvei, and so on. When we bench. When you're blessed with being sustained, you're blessed with health, with a family, with food. So we say, that's why we bench. And that's why we make brachas. Because we're benefiting from God's chesed. B'chazdei b'tuvei, his kindness, his chesed, his compassion. We also benefit from the other midas of Hashem. Gvura, his strength, his power, when he protects us. Netzach, when he battles for us. The determination. And the same thing with all the midas. The midas of Hashem that he bestows upon us teach us about godliness. And that's why we thank God, because we experience him through his emotions that he expresses to us. However, what is that compared to when you study God's mind? What is going on? How does God think? So when you learn Torah, it's more than just benefiting from God's kindness. You're actually going and learning how God's mind works. Because he manifested himself in this Torah, so you're understanding God's mind. So Chachma and Binah are reflections of something deeper than just God's expressions. It's just like, let's say, a parent and a child, or a teacher and a student. When a parent gives a child, protects the child, and bestows and transmits kindness to the child, so of course the child appreciates it. But the child doesn't know everything that's going on in the mind of a parent, because they're not the same level. We get a little older and smarter, and we begin to have conversations, we begin to appreciate also the mind of our mashpia, parent, a teacher, and so on. So essentially, in the relationship between us and God, there's a relationship with the Midos of Atzilus, are more an expression God, we experiencing God through his relationship with us. And the Mochin of Chachma and Binah are really more concealed, because it's not an obvious expression. It's more understanding why did God do kindness, how he works, what's his methodology, all the things we learn in the Torah, what, so to speak, makes God tick, if you wish. When I say God, I'm not talking about the highest levels of Atzmus. I'm talking about the Mochin of Chachma and Binah and Atzilus. Because as we learned, Atzilus gives us an awareness of the divine. The Mochin of Atzilus gives us an awareness of God's mind, and the Midas of Atzilus gives us an awareness of God's feelings. Or put it in different terms, that we, through Atzilus, we come to understand God, and we come to also feel godliness in our lives. So feelings are clearly more revealed. Mochin is more concealed, but the truth is we ultimately get access to both. But in relatively speaking, the Midas of Hashem are relatively more more of an outer expression than the Mochin of Hashem. When you're learning Torah, you're actually connecting to the way God thinks. And that is the highest level of Yichud, like he says in Tanya, chapter 5, that when you learn Torah, your mind becomes one with God's mind. Literally, a Yichud Nifla, a wondrous and awesome unity, where you can't separate between the two. So when you become and understand your teacher, when you understand your mashpia, your connection and bond with them is far deeper than when you're still on the receiving end of getting their midas. Even though the midas is also a relationship, and the midas are also one. Remember, Hashem's kindness is also an extension of godliness. But the extension is still through an instrument, through an expression. Whereas the unity of God with his mind is far deeper level of unity. So generally speaking, all of Atzilus is united, is an expression of the divine. But when you break it down, the Midas are Garmuhi. So they're more like a garment, or more something outer expression, which is one. And the Mochin is more Chayuhi, more like God is one with his energy. Think of it like an author in a book. So the letters on the page is like Garmuhi. You connect through them, you can get the idea. But the very idea itself teaches you about what's going on in the mind of the teacher. And that's even deeper. Like we learned earlier, that when we want to understand Torah properly, you have to go back to the author, where the author got the idea in the first place. Not just the expression of it. So there's the expression of the ideas, and there's the very energy of the ideas. Similar like to the difference between speech and thought. When you speak, obviously you're getting something straight from the teacher, but thought is far more connected to him because it's closer to his core essence, and therefore also more concealed from the recipient. So all these are examples to explain there is the Midas and Mochin, and in Mochin itself, it makes total sense. Like the Eitz Chaim says, that Chachma is closer to the source. Binah, which is already an elaboration of the details, is closer to expression. However, compared to Midas, Binah is also more concealed. So basically, Chachma is concealed compared to Binah. Binah is concealed compared to Midas. Chachma Binah in general is Chayuhi. When you break it down, Chachma is Chayuhi and Binah is Garmuhi. When you break it down further, Mochin, Chachma and Binah is Chayuhi and Midas is Garmuhi. So there you have it all. So in Chayuhi Garmuhi, he's focusing on how it's all one. In the Pardes, he clearly distinguishes, so the Rebbe Rashab, it's not a contradiction. Because when you break it down further, obviously there's a difference between Mochin and Midas, like I just explained. And what's the relevance to our discussion? Because when you go back to before the parentheses, and I think now comes easier to understand what he meant, remember, Binah is a place where you know the existence of something, but you don't know its personality. So there's a certain element of concealment, but there's something also that's there. In Midas, you see the thing itself. So basically what he's saying here is that, so that's why Binah is called Helem. Yeah, I go back. What I said initially, I think is correct, because Binah is giving us a taste of the divine, because it's all connected to the divine, except in Binah, it's a little more expressed than in Chachma, and in Midas, it's fully expressed, but not the full essence of it, because it's the it's an outer dimension. It's not the essence of it. It's coming into form and shape of Yitzira. So it's Yidiyas HaMahuz, but not, okay. Saspakla Yamira, so it's revealed like the Navi, but it's not like the Chacham, which is Yidiyas HaMetzias. Okay. I hope I explained it well. If not, let's stop here and I'll take questions. And let's see if anything could be clarified further if need be. I think the examples I gave make it a little more palatable. Yeah. Any questions?
Based on the principle that the higher something is, the lower it falls, wouldn't we say that Yitzira being lower than Bria because it's more revealed, but and ultimately Asiya, which is the lowest physical world, wouldn't that the octus there be even greater than the octus of Binah in Bria? Since don't we say that Atzmus is only in ourself in the world of Asiya? Can we relate to Atzmus because it doesn't sense its source? So wouldn't we say that would be reversed? That the ultimate octus is not in Iva Chayu Echad, but Iva Garmuhi Echad principle?
No, because Achdus, the definition of Achdus is Gilui, that you see a revealed unity. Would be like saying that a person who is like Parai is a higher level than Moshe Rabbeinu or the Efes who are Merkava. They were 24/7 a vehicle for God's presence in this world. So when you say Achdus, you mean a revealed unity where the mind and the emotions of godliness is manifesting in Chachma, Binah, and Midas. Bria, Yitzira, Asiya don't have that. When you say something higher falls lower, you just said it. It falls and it's lower. Why is it called lower then? If it has such an achdus, why is it lower? The answer is because in the Gilui, it manifests itself as a yesh. There is an element, in order to create the yesh, needs a divine power, koyach ha'atzmus. But it's precisely because it's not revealed, and precisely because it's not united in a revealed way, that's what allows the power to create something so low. But it is called tachtenim. It's called yesh, and it's called the lowest of all levels. In it is embedded an atzmi core power. But when you're talking about achdus, you're talking about revealed unity, a unification that is expressed and so on. And Atzilus has that, and Biyah does not have that. The kavan is still to come into Biyah and bring the achdus even in a alma de pruda, even in a fragmented world, even in a world that's separate from the divine. But there's no question, achdus is definitely, the higher you go, the more achdus there is, revealed. And then we want to have that achdus be revealed also in a place where initially there was a certain separation, a tzimtzum that concealed and so on. That's the general response to that in this context of what we're learning here. Remember, even when we talk about a Baal Tshuva having a quality that a tzaddik doesn't have, never forget that a tzaddik has something that a Baal Tshuva doesn't have either. He has a revealed connection, and he's fully integrated and fully internalized. Yes, he doesn't have the thirst. He doesn't have that hunger. He doesn't have that, you can call atzmizdik element, perhaps as much. But you ultimately you want to have that they both have both qualities. The tzaddik should have the quality of the Baal Tshuva of the tzaddik, just to use that as an example. But there are other, I wouldn't use that example here because that's tshuva And that's a whole different story. It's just an example to explain this idea.
But isn't the Rebbe leading to a point where the ultimate achdus in a revealed way with the Gula, Mashiach?
Yeah, but that's why you need, but without Atzilus, you can't achieve that.
But isn't it going to be
exactly what Atzilus does? That's what Atzilus does, and that's what Orein Sof does. Why don't you ask a better question? If Atzilus created the world, what do we need the whole Seder Shtalshlus for? Atzilus created the Yesh. You have the highest and the lowest. They're both integrally connected. What do you need the whole Atzilus altogether for? Because Atzilus, that's the process. How do we grow? It'd be like saying a child will tell you, hey, I heard that a child touches Atzilus. So what do I need to go to yeshiva for? Why do I need to learn Torah? Why do I even need to do mitzvahs? I have the etzim within me.
Right. The
same God that created everything also revealed himself through through Torah and he wants things, like we said, the tachlis or kavana is gilui. So the ultimate, yes, the ultimate is going to be a fusion of all, but you can't get to the ultimate if you don't go through the stages of all these levels of growth. Mutfa, murgash, muskul, maturity, higher levels of consciousness. I get back again to the same idea. The Baal Shem Tov said that the farm boy cried out kukuriku, and that pierced all the heavens. So why are we davening? Why don't we all just go figure out how roosters cry and go to shul, and we don't need to read all those tefillos, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Just let's cry out from the depths of our heart, kukuriku, oy vey. What do we need? Everything else. So the answer, I think the answer is clear.
Yeah, we want a full relationship with God, integrated with everything.
And integration and unity is what Atzilus provides. Without Atzilus, we would not know God, and we would not feel God. You'd have an etzem, it would be like a stone in this world created by God, an inanimate stone that has no way back to retrace its steps, to connect with godliness. It's just a product. The Yesh is just a product of Atzmus, but it doesn't have any awareness, and it doesn't have any consciousness. It needs a soul. It would be like saying create a body without a soul. Why do you need a soul? Why do you need all the keiches hanefesh and so on? This seems to be a recurring question that you and others may be asking. I think this is like basic, really not saying it in a critical way. This is like fundamental Aleph Beis of Chassidus, that you need both, and that's what it comes down to. You're never going to have one without the other.
I understand that, but isn't the Rebbe leading to a point where the ultimate?
But Mashiach has not come yet. It's thousands of years. You can't get to that place if you don't go through this. So even if he leads, it's because Atzilus and Asiya become united.
Right.
That's the answer. But you need Atzilus. And you need this, and you need the Ovis, and you need Tzaddikim, and you need Rabbeim. You can't just say that every human being on earth is just going to connect to the divine because the Etzem is there. That's what Kairach argued. Everybody is holy. What do we need a Moshe Rabbeinu for? What do we need teachers for? What do we need Torah for? What do we need mitzvahs for? That's exactly to get there. You need it all, and it's not just a stepping stone. Torah mitzvahs, God forbid, Torah mitzvahs is God's essence in the Torah. The same God that put himself into Yesh also put himself into Torah and into It's just that the Yesh reveals something that can't reveal, because precisely because its beautiful connection to God cannot show us how God created something that's not connected to him. It's exactly the opposite. It's because of the Helam. In other words, God's concealment teaches us something about God that revelation doesn't teach us. But the goal is revelation, to see it, not just that God did it. To see it, and to see it, you need to go through all these steps.
Beautifully put.
Just steps. It's part of the process. As I said, this is how God created existence. He created a neshama and a guf, and so on.
Beautifully put. But I was just saying that isn't the Rebbe leading us to an incredible chiddush of Helamatzmi and Moedecha?
But you can't get there without this. You can't have Helamatzmi if you don't have all this as well. Because Helamatzmi, the mere fact that you just said the word Helamatzmi, how do you know that it exists? Because you learned it in Ayin Beis. That's Chayuhi. Because Torah told you. You would never know about it. The mere fact that you just said it, what you're saying is also taught to us through the Giluyim. and our seichel begins to appreciate something that's even beyond Gili.
Thank you.
No problem, I'm just elaborating. Okay, so we'll stop here at the end of the paragraph, page 1391. Are there any other questions?
This is like you're always saying, of course Hashem could
Let me just say one more thing. When we say, for example, neshama nizunis min haguf, that the soul will be sustained by the body when Mashiach comes, like today the body is sustained from the soul, this doesn't mean the soul loses its chelik elikam and mal mamish. Let's not forget the second parak in Tanya, that we are children of God and that we have the chelik elikam and mal mamish. That will remain forever. It'll just say because the guf will have something that comes from the etzem that's even higher than any form of gili that the neshama has. And they'll actually both sustain each other, to be honest. They'll both feed each other, but there's something the guf will be able to reveal then that today cannot reveal yet. Anyway, go ahead. What were you saying? Sorry.
Is the Helam Atzmi, what you said just now. I said before that you said it many times. Of course, Hashem could do everything if we don't need all of this, but we want to do it in a way that it talks to us. So you must have all of these things in order to reach it.
Yeah, of course, koyach atzmus. God could just create us in this earth, no seder ishtalshlus, a yesh hanivra, and miraculously, maybe we do a mitzvah. That's all, and suddenly you're connected to yesh amiti. But then there wouldn't be a relationship. It would be like God doing it all. It would be the kol yochel of God that achieved this. It wouldn't be our effort. It wouldn't be integrated. It wouldn't be internalized. It wouldn't be something we can call that we're partners in. It would be just a chiddush that God achieved, and that would be it. Yes, that's correct. Important point, correct. That's why the internalization and integration of the Achdus and Atzilus is so vital, not only to reveal it, because that's how it becomes ours. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so we'll stop at the end of this paragraph, 1391. What still remains, one thing I'll say before we conclude, but I'm still trying to figure out, based on this, I said it the other day, and I think that's pshat, but I'm not positive, that Talmud, which is Bria, brings us back to the Ayin that he spoke of Keser, which is like the world of Tohu, which is higher than Chochmah Gluya. And Yetzirah, which is Mishnah, there it's all revealed, the crystallization, the crystal clear Torah that's revealed from Mikra to Mishnah. The concealment of Bria causes us to go back into the source, into the Ayin connected to Tohu. And through that, we reveal even deeper things. But he's not saying this explicitly. Here he's talking the other way around. The Maila of Yitzira, of Gili. Just pointing out because it's something we still have to figure out to reconcile that. I think that's the pshat. After concealment. Because Bria is definitely connected to the Ayin. So maybe through the struggle and exertion by trying to understand Torah through Talmud, you reach Ayin and maybe even Efes for that matter. I think he said that earlier as well. Atik. Okay, I'm going to have to develop that further. I have to think about it.
You did say something like that in the beginning of when it was first introduced.
Yeah, he did.
And trying to integrate that with everything else, it makes it hard.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and look it up earlier.